pattern you've tested has passed. Hi guys, and welcome to episode 86 of the Crochet Cakes podcast, a podcast all about crochet and my crafty endeavors. Today I'm going to be chatting to you about pattern testing and pattern design in case these are things that you are considering undertaking yourself. And then at the end of the video, I'll just give you a little bit of life update and draw the winner for the summer romance cal, because it's, already August. The summer romance cal ended on the 1st of August. But do not worry, I will be chatting to you about what other cals you can look forward to in this channel. So let's just dive right into the crafty content. As I said, I'm going to be sharing a little bit about pattern testing with you, and that is because if you tuned into the last podcast, you may remember that I was talking about the yarny temper tantrum that I had with a pattern I was testing. It's the little teeth tee, and it's not the pattern's fault that I was having these issues with it. Honestly, it's just that I was very upset that the yarn I had ordered wasn't what I actually had in mind, the colors that would create the story I wanted to tell with this pattern. So basically, I had thought that the colors I had chosen, this was the color that you see here, white sands. It's a very, very bright white, and I thought it was going to be more of a sandy white, beachy sand color, so more cream. And I ordered a bronze color and as well as a red sangria color, which was essentially a brick red. And I thought these colors together would tell a beautiful story about how we transition from summer to fall. But those weren't the colors that arrived. The sangria, which was the brick red color, they were out of stock when they actually got around to my order. So I had to substitute it for the ballerina colorway, which is just pink. And you guys know how I feel about pink. There are very few pinks that call my attention. So I was already very upset about that. And then the white sands is just a bright white. There's no cream about it. So I had to pick different colors, and I just went with what I had in stash that was actually DK, and this ended up how it turned out. But the yarny temper tantrum was resolved because one conversation with mine and Muse Crafts later, who is my mom and has her own podcast and her own crafty blog and just in general is a very crafty person, she said, well, those colors just really look like Christmas, kind of a vintage Christmas. That sage green gives you that old Christmassy vibe, and then the bright white, it's always like snow and Christmas, so why don't you just add red for your third color and it's your Christmas sweater. Well, that's brilliant. So that's what I did. And I am so happy with it. So lesson learned, just because you are trying to force something to be what you want it to be doesn't mean it's not something that you will end up liking, because all you have to do is adjust the way you're looking at this object. And that's what happened with this little as if tee. Oh my god, I have so many things going on in my brain. That's what happened with this little teeth tee. I wanted it desperately to be something, and I was focusing on what it wasn't instead of looking at it for what it was. A beautiful garment with Christmas potential. And yes, I said the word Christmas like 3 times already in this podcast. I love it, okay? And I am wearing it today with a handmade skirt. So this is actually an entirely handmade outfit. I'm wearing the, I know it's a pattern by it's the Hollyburn skirt. That's what it is. I am wearing the Hollyburn skirt in just a holly green with some vine drawings on it. I love this skirt. It doesn't really fit me, so don't look too closely because the zipper is a little bit on the... I've gained weight. So almost none of my skirts fit me, which is very upsetting because that does mean that, hey, I have to sew more. And it's not that I'm afraid of it, it's just I'm not really called to it right now. So let's talk, now that I've told you a little bit about this garment that I'm wearing, let's talk pattern testing and pattern testing process. So the first thing that I consider when somebody approaches me for a pattern test, and this is only the second pattern I've tested. I volunteered for one, which is the Stitch Tower patterns, and I volunteered for her hair rabbit pattern, and butchering it. I'm sorry, I'm so out of touch with my French that I'm butchering her name. Very, very sorry. Anyway, she approached me on Instagram and she asked if I would please test her pattern. So one of the things I consider when people approach me for this, or when I'm going to volunteer my services as a pattern tester, is this something that I'm going to use? Is this something that fits in my house? Is this something that fits with my aesthetic, which is still a work in progress? Or is this something I can gift to somebody else? Because not everything we make needs to have a purpose other than making us happy. Sometimes we just forget that simple fact that if it makes us happy, we can make it. We don't need permission from anybody else to make it, okay? So I saw this garment and I was like, oh, that looks like a fun make. It's got a spike stitch, which I'd never done before. And that's another thing that I look for in a pattern when I'm testing it or when I'm going to design it. Is there something that this pattern can teach to somebody else? Is there something I can learn from this pattern? And if that could be the stitch, that could be construction, that could just be a new way of making a top-down sweater. You know, it's just the little things that I like to focus on. And after I've determined all that, I of course look at the yarn content, the yarn the pattern calls for, because as I've mentioned a zillion times, I live in Florida. Florida is hot. You get to wear warm woolly makes, maybe stretching it for a month out of, 12 months. So 11 months out of the year, you're wearing cotton or bathing suits because it's that hot. And if I'm not in Florida, I usually travel to Puerto Rico, which is more humid. It's not as hot, it's just humid. But we do have mountains, so there's that lovely mountain breeze. But I digress. The point is, wool does not really fit into my wardrobe, no matter how much I love it and covet it and just want to squish it and be wrapped in it. So I will try to look for alternative fiber content that will still produce a similar drape to what the pattern designer intended. So for example, this Little Teeth Tee is designing DK weight wool yarn. And I chose a DK weight cotton blend yarn. Now, don't focus too much on the DK aspect of the yarn because I bought this yarn because it said DK weight. This is a Sundance Hayfield Sundance. It's gorgeous. It's got super high twist and it produces a beautiful stitch. But anyway, it is a thinner DK than the pattern calls for, so that's another thing you should consider. You should look at the yardage, not just the weight, because fibers weigh differently. 50 grams of cotton will be less yardage than 50 grams of wool just because cotton is a heavier weight fiber. So once that was determined, I of course don't really have DK weight yarn in my stash. I have the odd hanks here and there, but I didn't really have something that would be solid color and then two contrasting colors. So I purchased it, as you've already heard that dilemma. And the other thing I did was, after I had made all these decisions already, I read the pattern in its entirety. I read it through and I read it very carefully because, sometimes there might be verb tense, problems or things like that, that as a pattern designer, when you're constantly looking at this piece you've written, you may not really catch, and somebody else with fresh eyes that's just seen it will be like, hey, maybe you should write it this way, or it would sound better this way. And after I've read it, I've asked questions. If they forgot to include a gauge swatch, I'll be like, what's this gauge swatch, or what hook am I supposed to use with the gauge swatch? Am I supposed to focus on the stitch or the pattern repeat for the gauge swatch? That type of thing. And after I've done my gauge swatch, I will make an executive decision. And why do I say that? I didn't really have gauge for this pattern, the Little Teeth Tee pattern, but I was okay with that. My gauge was smaller because the yarn I was using was thinner. but I was testing a size medium, and I knew that if I did a true medium, it would be too big on me and it wouldn't fit me. Okay, so that's another thing you need to consider. What changes can I make to this pattern that won't actually alter the written instructions, but will still serve a purpose for me? And once all that is made, then I proceed to actually start the pattern test, and I keep a stitch count of every row. And if there are increases, I state if I ended on an increase or if I didn't end on an increase, and I make sure to ask the pattern designer if I was supposed to end on an increase or not, if I was supposed to end on a certain stitch or not. Because we all interpret things differently, don't we? It's just as any other painting or art. We might look at a painting and we might see this, but that wasn't what the artist intended for you to see. So it's always safe to ask questions. I can be very annoying like that. I prefer when the pattern designer has like a Google Doc that you can write all your comments, questions, queries, or concerns right on the Google Doc, and they will automatically know. So after I've done all that, and I've followed the instructions, and I've written down measurements, and I've written down stitch counts, I will look at the pattern and be like, okay, how can I make this me? You don't really have to do that because you are testing a pattern, but there are some executive decisions that you can take, like I said. For example, you might have the DK weight yarn called for in your stash, but it's a very busy color, so you don't really want to make a 2 or 3 color garment. You'd think that would ruin the design, so you decide to just go for 2 colors. So there are little things like that that you can consider when you're testing a pattern. Now, as I mentioned, in terms of this pattern, it calls for 3 colors, and there's really only border around the neckline and the sleeves. So I thought to myself, well, you want to make this pattern as accessible and versatile as possible. So what can I not change, but what can I do differently in the pattern that won't actually affect the stitch count or anything like that, but will give readers a choice in what they can do? So for this little teeth tee, for me, that was the bottom border. I wanted this sweater to look more Christmassy because that was the theme I had decided on. So I wanted to have more of the green, and actually I wanted to have more of the red, but I wanted to continue the take on the 2 colors. So I'm going to stand up a little bit so you can see how I finished the tee. And as you saw, I followed the pattern. I did a spike stitch in green, then the rows in white, and then a spike stitch in red, and that just gave it, for me, an extra little detail that I really appreciate about the pattern. And the designer was very kind about it, and she just asked me if I could provide good pictures so people could then decide if that was something they wanted to add to their design. So that's my pattern testing process, and as I mentioned in the beginning, it's very, very similar to my design process. I am just as dedicated to that because even when I pattern test, I will do little charts. I don't just count. I make little sticks in a piece of paper that are supposed to represent the stitch, and I count them to make sure that I didn't do a mistake. And if I'm increasing but I don't have the stitch count the designer called for, why is that? So I'll do my little chart and I'll be like, oh, because I missed this stitch. So, you know, it's an additional help. And like I said, it's nothing fancy. It's just little sticks that represent stitches. So just remember to take good pictures afterwards, because this is your way of helping the designer market her design. And be sure to include all your notes. Like I said, I keep them all written down, so if I do a Ravelry project page, they can be posted on Ravelry with all my little notes, comments, and concerns, okay? So that is my pattern testing process, which, as I've already said 3 times, is similar to my design process. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my design process. And as an example, I'm going to be sharing the crochet flower duster, which is a free pattern already available on my website, which I will link down below. You've heard me talk about this one a lot. I absolutely love it, but I don't think I really mentioned the design process of it. Not a lot anyway. So how did this beautiful crochet pattern come about? Well, I've had it in my mind for a while that I wanted to make a long cardigan, also known as a duster, so crochet flower duster. And I knew I wanted it to be in a cotton yarn because, again, Florida, right? I don't want to be weighed down, because sometimes even cotton, if it's a worsted weight, it can weigh you down. So I had these two little things in mind, but it wasn't until I went to revisit the Shield Maiden pattern and just edit it here and there that I was struck by lightning. And not only that, that also coincided with me going to my closet and trying to assess what pieces I actually like in my closet. And I'll explain that in a little bit. So the first thing was from the Shield Maiden pattern. If you've no idea what I'm talking about, I'll include a link down below, but it's essentially another free pattern on my website. It's a bottom-up construction and it's a little summer top. But the border of it has a stitch that I'm calling the flower stitch because I just found it in a vintage stitch dictionary and it had no name. So this flower stitch was just calling my name, which was perfect because since I wanted to crochet in a cotton, I needed the structure of the cotton because the flower stitch is kind of a filet type stitch, so you want to have a little bit of structure so it doesn't warp out of shape. So once I had all that decided, as I said, I went to my closet and I was kind of looking to see how would I wear this long cardigan, how would I design this long cardigan. So I was looking at the cardigans I already own that are fashion, store-bought. And I actually came across this piece that I knew I had in my closet, and it is not a kimono and it is not a yukata. For those of you that might not know, kimono is they're usually long, made out of silk, and a yukata is also long, but it's for summer, so it's made of a lighter cotton fabric. It's more informal than the kimono. I bought it at a Japanese fair, and the man said that it's what you wear on top of a kimono during winter to give yourself extra warmth. So it's not as embellished as the kimono. At least mine isn't. It has some gold embroidery at the bottom with a little carriage that I absolutely loved. And it's black and gold. That's the combo that it has. Also has little flowers to keep with the nature of it. So once I saw that and I had the flower stitch in my mind, I knew I wanted to crochet something that was inspired by this design, the kimono, the yukata, and a design with such rich history. So I delved into the the history of the kimono, which is the traditional dress of Japan. And I read books, I read a museum catalog, I read articles, and I just browsed as much as I could historical pieces, not reproductions or anything like that. So with all that in mind, I then proceeded to think about my design. I knew I wanted the shape to resemble the kimono, but it wasn't going to be an actual kimono. I was just inspired by it. And it was perfect because the flower stitch I had chosen kind of reminds you of nature, which is something that kimonos in their design usually had. Embroidery or stories inspired by nature. So I was really, really excited. I was so excited that after I did my gauge swatch and I did my little charts with math, everything was supposed to work out. It didn't. I had to rip it back 5 times in order to actually have a design that would work, that would actually fit me and other people. So that's kind of my design process and how I go about it. And I had also mentioned the idea of learning something new. So obviously if you're a beginner crocheter, this would be an entirely new concept to you. But if you're an advanced crocheter, maybe you've never seen the stitch before, because I hadn't. And I found it, like I said, in a vintage stitch dictionary. And the construction of it is bottom up, but I tried to make it as seamless as possible. So that also gives you an idea of how I'm trying to incorporate things that might be unusual or you might not have seen before. I don't know. This is all in my head, really. But I did want to mention that little piece because one of the things that I love is about crochet is that you never really learn it. There are so many things to learn, new ways to make the same old stitches, new ways to start patterns and things like that. For example, a pattern that I'm working on currently is not mine, actually, sorry, that I'm just crocheting it up. It's from Nomad Stitches, and it is her Mozaika Ginesh top. And first of all, this is new to me in two ways. She uses I'll just call it a cast on that's not a chain or a foundation single crochet, and it's also mosaic crochet, single row mosaic crochet. Two things that are not known to me or that I've never done before. I've heard about mosaic crochet before, but I've never done it. So to start the pattern, she has you make what I'm calling a crochet long tail cast on. She just calls it a crochet cord. And essentially what you're doing is, if you've ever knit before, you are leaving a long tail, and you're going to take your slip knot that you usually have on your hook. Your tail should be facing you. Your working yarn should be behind the hook. And you are going to wrap your long tail front to back on the hook. And then you're going to pick up your yarn back to front. And you're going to just go through both of those loops. And it gives you such a pretty start to a project. It's so much nicer than the chain and even the foundation single crochet, because it's not, I find that when you do foundation single crochet, at least for me, it's very stretchy and then it just shrinks. And this chain, or what a long tail cast on, stays about the same size because you're using I use a hook size that's half a size bigger than what I'm actually going to use to crochet the pattern up. So I just thought I would share that with you because I'm actually going to incorporate this cast on method in my new design, which is an Egyptian inspired top. So yes, you can never stop learning in crochet, and you can read and explore other people's patterns, because that's what I love about doing somebody else's patterns. There's always something to learn. For example, for this little teeth tee, I was like, oh, so I don't have to increase in every row to get a yoke sweater. That's great. You know, and I've never done a spike stitch before. So these are just little things to consider when you are choosing a design, I guess. It doesn't really have to be complicated. It can be whatever you want it to be. So that is the crafty content for this podcast. I will now announce the winner of the Summer Romance Cal, and I believe I had mentioned that I was going to pick two winners. I was going to pick one from Ravelry, the chatter thread on Ravelry, and also the Instagram hashtag. So I'm very excited to be able to do that, and I'm going to get up and just pick the things I have and share that with you. So one of the prizes is what I'm calling the shawl prize, and this is because it's a little shawl bag that has cute little groundhogs on it. I love this bag. It's also got polka dot fabric, red and white polka dot fabric. Inside we've got a little bunny kit, and we've got yarn. This is 2 hanks of worsted weight yarn, and it is in a gorgeous teal. It's actually showing up pretty true to color. It's looking a little bit more blue on the screen than it really is. But this is from Knit Crate. It's the Knitology Glowing Worsted. It's called Pachyderm. It's 40% superwash merino, 30% silk, and 30% alpaca. So it's perfect for a shawl. And together with this, you are going to be getting the Persuasion Shawl by Lori, a lovely viewer of this podcast. So congratulations, you won this. Name on the screen. And the other one is a little sock kit. Sandra from Cherry Heart donated her pick and mix sock pattern, so I'm very excited to put together a little kit for that, and it is an Alice in Wonderland little sock bag. It's got teacups and cake because tea and cake make the world go round. And then inside we've also got another knit crate yarn. It's Knitology Sheen in the Titmouse colorway, and this is 75% merino wool, 15% silk, and 10% cashmere. Lovely and plump. This is a very plump fingering weight. And you also get a little Easter egg kit as well. So to the winners, please send me an email, crochetcakespodcast@gmail.com, with your address and your actual name, not Instagram handle or, you know, Ravelry, and you can contact me through the email, as I just said, crochetcakespodcast@gmail.com, through Ravelry, where I'm Crochet Cakes, or through Instagram, where I'm Crochet Cakes. Or if you wish, you could even go out to my website and fill out the contact form, and I will get an email to my Crochet Cakes Podcast Gmail account, and I will get back to you. In terms of the patterns, I will let the designers know, and they can forward you the pattern through Ravelry, or maybe you could contact them if you're no longer able to use Ravelry, and they can just send it straight to your inbox. So yes, guys, that is all the crafty content I have for you today. Please let me know what you thought about this new format. I just thought it was time to shake things up a little bit and assign themes to every podcast instead of just chatting to you about what I've made during the past 2 weeks. Let me know if you like it. If you don't, I will definitely go back to the previous format. I just wanted to explore and try something a little bit different for you guys, because I don't want to keep creating the same content that I have, you know, for 4 years. I wanted to spice things up, spicier life. Speaking of, I have yet to work on that blanket. Anyway, that is really what I've been up to. I've also been working on revamping the site and research for my Egyptian-inspired top. And I'm really liking this idea of creating garments that are inspired by history, because history was my first love, and then came crafting. But it's just fun. And I think this is it for today, except that I will see you in the next video, which will probably be very soon, because I am teaming up with Anna from Stitchcraft and Wizardry, and we are doing a little Q&A to welcome all our new subscribers. So basically, I had posted on Instagram, on my Insta stories, if anybody wanted to ask me or Anna any questions that we could include in a question pool and do a little special episode for you guys. Nobody asked me any questions, so I will be coming up with the questions that I have, and I'll be sharing those answers in a separate video to just kind of keep things a little bit interesting. And for all those new subscribers or old subscribers that know some things about me, I hope you learn some more and that we can just keep crafting together. I know the world hasn't been a very happy place lately. There's been a lot of disasters in Lebanon, and, you know, social justice movements and a lot of things. So I hope that I was able to keep you company during this time and make your life just a little bit happier, as you clearly make mine, because if it wasn't for you, I don't think I'd be doing these videos. So thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode, and I will see you soon with that Q&A video, and just happy crafting, guys. Bye.